Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health with Sara Banta. I'm a busy wife, mom of 3, and an NANP certified supplement professional. But that's not all. I'm also the founder of the 3-time award-winning Accelerated Health Products, a brand offering innovative natural supplements to optimize your health and make it easy. The podcast is not just a source of information. This is a springboard into learning, to the free group coaching on Telegram, where we continue the process. Because after today, especially, you're going to be going, wow, my mind is blown. I need to watch that 5 more times over. I have a ton of questions. Well, those questions can be handled in the Telegram free group coaching, and the link is on the website at SaraBantaHealth.com. I post tips and tools every day. You can ask your questions. You can post your successes and feed off of each other. It's really hard in today's world to have a like-minded group. I know it's very isolating, or it can be, if you are on this health journey and all your family members and friends are still on the standard American diet and going out on the weekends and have a different lifestyle. Not that it's wrong, but it can be isolating. So what can you expect here? You can expect new episodes every Monday and Tuesday with in-depth health discussions and experts. On Thursdays, I post hot topic issues that are in the news, and that keeps everything interesting. And then, of course, the group coaching on Telegram. If you're curious about detoxing, I've created over 10 unique, easy detox cleanses to help you reset your body and feel great. And you can take the detox quiz on my website to find out which one is right for you. They're designed to make you feel good day one. A lot of detoxes, you feel hangry, you get those detox flu symptoms, and you want to quit day 2. So mine are designed to make you feel good day 1. And if you don't know where to start with your supplements, just email me through the website. Happy to put together a protocol for you. There's actually a form you can fill out for a supplement protocol. Today, we have one of my mentors, brilliant Teri Cochrane, back. She is the amazing author of The Wilditarian Diet. That is a must read for all of you. It will tell you why I talk about wild meats all the time. I just had some venison for lunch. And she is just amazing in all of her talents, and we'll let her get into that a little more. Welcome, Teri. How are you?
Hi, Sara. So nice to be with you all again.
I just love having you, because at every turn, every couple of months, there's new stuff that is coming out. We're in a new world that is turning over and over, and these new diseases and these new manifestations are happening. And it doesn't all have to be bad news, but you have to be on top of your health. And I love how you talk about health disruption lies at the intersection of our food supply, which is not what it was 20 years ago, our environment, which I've done podcasts on microplastics and heavy metals and GMOs and glyphosate and the spike protein,
Right.
And then stress.
Right.
And what comes first, the stressor or the stress then feeding into the stressor, and it's this vicious cycle, right? So I want to talk first, just generally, about that intersection of the food supply, the environment, and the stress, and why that is the cause of all of these chronic diseases that people are finding themselves experiencing.
Great question. And I wrote The Wilditarian Diet, Living as Nature Intended. It was released in March of 2018. So that was 6 years ago. And at that time, we were documented to have 1 in 14 Americans struggling with an autoimmune condition. That means that they had been clinically diagnosed with autoimmunity. Back 100 years ago, autoimmunity wasn't even an issue. Autism wasn't an issue. I think it was 1 in 1,500 to 1 in 10,000. And the statistics now, it's 1 in 30 something children have autism. chronic illness wasn't even a budgetary item for our government. Now we spend 4.3 trillion on chronic illnesses, and every one of our top 5 killers in the United States are metabolic diseases, meaning that they can be managed or even prevented with the right match of foods to you. And so your question to what happened first, or what is the intersection, I believe there came a tipping point. So with the onset of pesticides and herbicides post World War II to help feed the world, we took actually bomb material, and this is out of Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma, which he wrote many years ago and was one of my catalyzers for really understanding how the food supply was already being intoxicated. I wept when I read that book, really understanding how bad the food was then. And what's happened over time is with the use of pesticides, which glyphosate in particular, which is now outlawed in 100 countries, yet we continue to spray 300 million pounds on our food supply every year, on our crops every year. That changed fundamentally the way that our microbiome and our mechanisms of action in the body existed. So what did glyphosate do? 3 main things. It mimicked glycine. So why is glycine important? It's necessary for protein digestion. So if you're spraying wheat with glyphosate, and what is wheat? It's a protein. Gluten is a protein, and you're making the body think, oh, I don't need this amino acid to break down protein. Guess what? You're going to be much more sensitive to gluten. That's why many people in Europe, where they don't spray, can actually eat gluten. They come here, they have problems. The second thing that it did was that it disrupted our body's ability to convert sulfur to sulfate. And sulfur is really important for mental health. It's important for our gut integrity. It's important for our joint integrity. It's important for our hormones. So when that got interrupted, we can't process sulfur. So then these healthy foods that contain sulfur, such as broccoli and arugula and bok choy and egg yolks, became less friendly. And then the oxalobacter bacteria, which used to live in our gut, well, that got taken out with glyphosate. So now this bacteria that was helping us protect us from plants that were otherwise healthy also became a problem. Then we had the pesticides and the herbicides and the hormones being dumped into our water supply, which then we drink. And then we are all these microplastics we talk about. There is a study that shows that by the year 2050, we will have more microplastics or plastics by weight in the ocean than fish.
Wow.
Right? And so we wonder why our coral reefs are getting a little bit damaged and why the water temperatures are rising. And so the environment is really just a function of what we've done to it. We've gone to industrial agriculture, which is not sustainable. It's showing it that we've taken off 90% of our topsoil, and the nutrients from monocropping every year remove the same nutrients over and over again. That's why regenerative farming is the way back, I believe. And then we dumped it with pesticides. So we lost the topsoil, we dumped it with pesticides. Our water is dirty because not only all the pesticides and herbicides, which creates nitrogen runoff, then all the pharmaceuticals that we take also go into our water supply. And so that becomes an environmental toxin. Plus the air is when we spray, it also goes into the air. And now glyphosate is ubiquitous. So even if you are getting an organic product, but that organic farm may be next to a farm that's not organic, you're still kind of intersecting with that. And then the fact that we are stressed, we were already stressed before the pandemic, and then the pandemic essentially took away our safety mechanism, that what little was left of it, right? And then our socialization, which is necessary because we are energetic beings and we have to connect with others to really fuel the cells. For us to feel safe, there has to be human connection. Human touch. They've done studies with children in orphanages. If you're not touched, you will have PTSD. That's why they swaddle babies in hospitals, so they feel safe. So their energetic field is feeling like, oh yes, I can be touched and I'm safe. If we don't do that, it stresses the body. When we desocialized the fabric of our humanity over this pandemic, we effectively became irritated at the nervous system level because we were no longer in community. And so all of those factors intersect with one another, because when they say a rising tide lifts all boats, well, a sinking tide will drown all boats, and it's all happening at the same time. So it's this intersection, and that's why you saw that I posted it on Instagram, and I lectured on it at the think tank about a month ago. It's the intersection of this that is the call to action for us to not only take a stand, but then take action against what's happening, because it's the devolution of especially the children and their illnesses.
Well, what you are insinuating, but needs to be even more emphasized, is not just the microplastics in the water or the soils being depleted, but for people like you and me who are eating wild meats and all of the right vegetables, those soils are not giving the vegetables the nutrients. The microplastics are affecting the health of the fish that we're trying to eat that's wild. And what are our animals, our venison and our elk and our bison eating? So it's affecting everybody, not even just the people that are out there eating the standard American diet.
Right.
And what's so crazy now is that in my coaching group, I get these profiles of people saying, Sara, I eat all organic. I'm doing everything you're saying. My liver enzymes have shot through the roof. My thyroid numbers are going down. I haven't changed anything. So I wanted to first touch on thyroid, because so many listeners have hypothyroidism, and I would love to know your belief on what the true statistic is today, because I think it's much worse than it was even 2 years ago on those suffering from some sort of suboptimal thyroid function. And where is this coming from? I know we talked about the metabolic diseases coming from the intersection of what you just talked about: infertility, diabetes, dementia, Alzheimer's, depression, fatty liver disease. And I want to get into fatty liver in a minute. But first, thyroid.
So thyroid, the butterfly gland, is one of the most sensitive glands to chemicals. And aluminum in particular, it's highly sensitive to aluminum. Also, thyroid has to be conjugated. The T3 is conjugated primarily in the liver. And if you're not breaking down fats, and that liver is unhappy for all the reasons we just spoke about, because we're toxic. Now, I don't want the listeners leaving today saying, oh my God, I might as well just throw in the towel and go have a McDonald's because everything is bad. No, that is absolutely not true. And I just spoke with a gentleman before we came online, one of my clients, whose first follow-up, he's been, dealing for a decade with depression and joint pain and so many things. And he's 90% better, right? In 2 months. So there's still absolutely a way out. We just have to be very intelligent and really become our own body interpreters. So why is the thyroid in particular right now going haywire? Well, we know that Hashimoto's, in the clinical literature, there's statistics that show that over 80% of Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune thyroiditis for hypothyroidism, is linked to a viral reactivation in the thyroid. And if you look at the work of Anthony Williams, who really talks about this, and Epstein-Barr in particular, that's what the clinical literature shows, not his medical intuition, but truly clinical literature out of the big publications. So Epstein-Barr lies in wait, and then through our food supply, because amyloids will trip the viruses, and that was my pioneering research and work in the Wilditarian book, where 8 years ago I said, hey guys, we better stop eating amyloids, because guess what? 1 in 14 of us has an autoimmune condition. And I believe in my research, the research that I have found and the clinical outcomes show, if we are eating amyloid burdened foods, then it's helping to contribute to the reactivation of these viral loads, which are then contributing to autoimmunity. Very direct link. And that's why we've been, even before the pandemic, we were so successful in really helping to manage in many cases. And again, N of one, not making any claims, but each N of one becomes a string of N's to really help fortify against autoimmunity. And we've been highly successful against Hashimoto's in particular. So now what's happened? Well, enter the pandemic, enter the spike protein. And also, again, in the clinical literature, it shows that the spike protein turns on the herpes family of viruses, in particular, Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, varicella, really big, big, big. So guess what? We've all been exposed. If we're eating amyloid rich, or even if we're not, if we've been exposed and we're under stress and there's something else that comes in, like for example, I haven't had COVID in 3 years, yet I got the flu in January, and by getting the flu, it turned on my Epstein-Barr. And I know because I looked at my clinical work and it was elevated. Not my IgM, which is active. I didn't have mono, but I had a reactivation of Epstein-Barr and I felt it.
Mm-hmm.
And my thyroid numbers were normal. It doesn't affect my thyroid, but it affected me metabolically. I got very tired. And so.
But your thyroid numbers stayed the same.
Thyroid numbers stayed the same, and I didn't have antibodies, which for me was great. But when there is elevated liver enzymes, for me, the way that I interpret that is that that's a viral load. And so somewhere that individual has reactivated some sort of viral load in them, and they could have just been brushed with it, which means that they don't actually got sick. They didn't actually get sick, but it did some other tripping. And if there's elevated thyroid numbers, yes, absolutely. Those two are correlative.
Okay, so I just want to pipe in with my own experience with you, Teri, and you have pinpointed Epstein-Barr in me and in my two daughters. And I also had the varicella virus that was causing the optic nerve inflammation, and Epstein-Barr was part of it. And I want all of you guys to know that through Teri's muscle testing, that's what she concluded. And you might say, well, muscle testing is BS. That doesn't mean anything. I then went to a different practitioner on a machine, and he actually doubted Teri's work because he's got an ego. And he confirmed that I had all of that viral activity going on. And how it affected me was different how it affected one of my daughters, who was having severe hormonal issues, severe menstrual pain, but then it wasn't just at that menstrual cycle, it continued on. So what I've seen, not just in my own family, is that a lot of women are complaining about menopausal symptoms being worse and then menstrual cycles being worse. And we've seen it in our house for over 2 years, being just on that one day of the start of the period being really bad. Well, over the last couple months, it was every day of the month for 2 months, where we're like, what is going on? It's gotten severely worse. And one doctor wanted to put her on progesterone. Teri said no. And I had to bear the brunt of everyone around me saying, you need to put her on progesterone. And me being Mama Bear had to say to trust. And I always trust you, Teri. And she trusted me, which thank goodness she did. We have incorporated Teri's supplements. We have gone to a very low-fat diet. I never thought I'd see the girl eat venison and bison so much in my life. And this is the girl that would say, Mom, I can eat anything. I can go eat pizza and whatever, and I feel fine. Well, she's taken a turn with that. Let me think. 2 weeks ago, normally she wakes up on the day of her period and she lays herself down by 5 a.m. by my biocharger, because she's in so much pain. And so I'm sitting there. I usually get up at 5. She gets up at around 6, goes and works out, comes home, and she says, oh, by the way, my period came. I go, wait, what? And I said, are you okay? She said, I don't feel great, but I can do life. Whereas normally she's in her bed yelling at me, Mom, I can't do this anymore. It's not worth it. This pain isn't normal. There's something severely wrong with me. And did we ever start that progesterone? I never told you, Teri. We did not. We did not. We incorporated a little acupuncture. And that acupuncture doctor, I asked him his opinion. I said, should we put her on progesterone? He goes, nope. That's not natural. We are going to heal her. Her body's going to heal itself. So long story short, with this Epstein-Barr virus reactivation, the varicella virus activation, I haven't really, I mean, yes, I was exposed to COVID. Yes, I probably had it. Never had any symptoms of it. The spike protein is definitely in my body, and it's definitely in everyone in my family's body. We are all exposed unless you are literally in a tent in, Timbuktu, isolated from life. It is something we all need to be concerned with and be on top of. And health is not something to be passive anymore.
No.
We have to be proactive. And you can feel good still. And that's what's so this is good news, everybody. This is not a downer of a podcast. This is really good news. The other thing that I personally have seen, and we're going to get into it when I see you in a month or so, Teri, is iron overload.
Yes.
And Dr. Morley Robbins has been on my show. You've talked to Morley Robbins about the importance of copper and how it relates to iron. I have always been anemic. My daughter has always been anemic. We've tried a million different iron supplements, didn't do a thing. I gave up, whatever. Now my iron is fantastic. However, my ferritin's high, and that's something we're going to deal with. But why are we seeing this iron overload during this pandemic and in this new era?
Yeah. So great question. I love Morley. Hi, Morley, if you're watching. I think you're a genius. So Morley and I are colleagues, and he does really understand copper and iron deeply. He is, if you haven't read his book, The Cure, is incredible. Actually, the gentleman right before this podcast, the patient and client was like, I read The Cure. And I'm like, I didn't tell you about that. He's like, no, but it was really, you mentioned it somewhere on a podcast. So we love Morley. He's a genius of this work. So why is iron becoming such a big deal? I've also been very low in iron historically, not dangerously low, but generally never had an issue with iron. I had an iron overload this year. Again, back to the spike protein. Well, multiple factors occurred during this pandemic. One is we all took a bunch of zinc because we were told it helps with the spike protein, which it does. However, zinc is an antagonist to copper. So if you take one mineral in the absence of the other that it antagonizes, then you're already going to have an imbalance. The second thing is that, again, once the spike protein, the amyloids increase iron overload, and iron overload makes amyloid. So we know that the spike protein has vectors of amyloid genesis, and that's going to affect iron, turned on hemochromatosis. Iron then becomes oxidated, and then it does really bad things like builds biofilm and builds crystals and contributes to heart disease. And the spike protein naturally turns off copper. So we had two elements to turn off copper, and copper is the antagonist to iron, and oxidated iron really displaces mitochondrial function because you need magnesium and carbon dioxide to run that ATP, but you need copper to start the engines. And without that, iron gets in place, it oxidates, becomes part of the reactive oxygen species. And this is why I'm being very cautious around hyperbaric chamber use right now, because the hyperbaric chamber increases oxygen. Well, if we're having a lot of ROS, it's the wrong oxygen. You're going to feel worse after HBOT than you did before. So please have your irons checked if you're going to do that. What's the fastest way to get rid of iron? Phlebotomize. Give blood. Give blood. Go to the Red Cross and give blood, or wherever your station is, that you'll be doing somebody some good, and also you'll be doing yourself some good as well. But yes, it's a really big deal, and I'm a very big proponent of your copper liquid, Sarah. I love it. I take it. I have it by my bedside, right? And what I also notice is when I take it before bed, the whites of my eyes are whiter in the morning. Why? Because it's helping my liver overnight manage that iron overload. That I took my iron, it was high in January. I did phlebotomy in April. I probably need to go back and do it again every quarter. And so I do notice that really helps. But iron is an oxidator. Oxidation makes things not work. It rusts us. So it's
Right.
a really important mention that is not typical to blood work.
So taking a step back, can someone have a normal iron level but a high ferritin level? And how is that also related to high liver enzymes?
So the liver has to break down all these things, right? So again, back to the spike protein, which is making the amyloids, which is increasing the iron, which is making more amyloids, which is increasing liver function. I mean, the liver enzymes, because it's viral. And also beware of people that have extremely low iron. And Morley is a big, waving the flag of, hey, there are very few people who are really iron deficient. They're just not bioavailable, making their iron is deeply stuck in their tissues. And I had a client who had iron levels of 2. Her free iron was 2, so dangerously low. But I also knew that it was not a function of not having it. It was just so deeply in the tissue. She agreed to a transfusion. Her iron went to 600, and she then had 3 autoimmune conditions. Why? I perceived that she turned on all these viruses because the iron turned on the amyloids, which turned on the viruses, which then created the autoimmunity. So we have to be really careful with iron right now, even if your iron is low. And I work with a very skilled doctor who also knows Dr. Stephen Spencer, who also knows Dr. Morley, who is a magic magician on getting iron up. So this person, we worked on her collaboratively. Her iron is now normalized without taking iron.
Well, I can tell you personally, taking iron supplements didn't work for me. My iron is now normal with eating, the wild meats and whatever, and taking my copper and doing what I do now. So there's not a direct correlation between taking an iron supplement and boosting your iron to a healthy level.
Right.
And you could possibly be taking a toxic iron supplement, which
absolutely. And just like your daughter, back to your daughter, when they say these are the symptoms, the traditional medical community just says, let's throw a hormone at it. Well, she actually needed to be anti-hormone, okay?
Yeah.
Because she was fat malabsorbed. So to put a potentially toxic hormone that's not even natural into a body that's not breaking down fat is, to me, it's unconscionable, but they don't understand it, right? They just don't understand that the reason why she was having so much trouble is because her liver was backed up because of the virus, which made the liver unhappy, which backed up hormones. And so you need to assimilate and really go low fat, not add more fat through a hormone.
And I have to just add to that, 3 days before we saw you, we hadn't started the progesterone. We never ended up starting the progesterone, but he had told us to start her on pregnenolone, and we did. And she already had a loss of appetite. And this girl eats like a horse. And I'm like, what is going on? She looks at food and she can't eat it. And she will start crying. And then she would say, Mom, just do a feeding tube down me. Can you do a feeding tube? And then three days after taking the pregnenolone, it was even worse. And that's when we saw you. And she's my light. She's my happy girl. And when she was on with you, she had nothing on her face and no emotion, no energy, no nothing. So fast forward, this morning, she asks me to make her a bison ribeye for lunch.
Great.
I mean, this girl, she is eating and she's building herself back up. She's not back to where she was because it's going to take a little time. But my goodness, she is feeling confident that she's on the right path and she knows that you were right. And it's so, such a relief as a mom to know that I had made the right decision, because it's not even just about me, it's about my child. And for all of you moms out there, you know that you don't care about you when it comes to your own child. So that's what's so interesting on the hormones, because no one thinks about the fact that if your liver's backed up, then you can't even process what you're taking. Mm-hmm. And this comes back to one of the first questions I ever had for you when I was eating a ton of vegetables from the sulfur family, the broccoli, cauliflower, and all of that. And I said, well, Teri, if my body needs sulfur, how am I going to get it if I'm not eating it? And you said, well, you're not even using it now because your body can't break it down or use it. So there's this chasm between what you're taking in and your body actually converting it into energy or doing its job in your body. And if that's not working, then you want to just take it off, take take the pressure off the system and let the system calm down.
Absolutely. And the good news is animal protein, the right kind of animal protein, is sulfur rich, but it doesn't it has the kind of the protective amino acids around it that makes it digestible. Right. So it makes it easy for us to gain our sulfur in a healthy way for us, because I have a sulfur sensitivity as well. But I love my red meat.
Yes, I
Wild.
do too.
So
So fatty liver, iron overload can contribute to fatty liver, but we're seeing a skyrocketing number of people with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Is it just the iron? Is it the spike protein? Obviously the standard American diet has something to do with it, but let's talk about fatty liver.
So now they're saying 10% of children have fatty liver. How is that possible? That's crazy. 10% to up to 25 to 30%. So that's just, but statistically, that is not normal. Fatty liver reserved for individuals that in the past had a drag to excess. It's a function of not being able to break down fat. And so when you think about the polyethanol glycol, which was the delivery system for, and I'm not anti anything, I just want to make that clear. I don't want to make any definitive statements, but that was the carrier for how we got injected, the PEG, and that's the lipid. And so the spike protein is also lipid. It's corona, it's got lipids. So we've got like this tripid bilipid layer cake, if you will, of lipids. And so we're already over lipided, right? And then we've got the iron overload, and we have the insulin insensitivity that comes as well from the pandemic, because it affects GABA, and GABA is very concentrated in the pancreas, and the pancreas is obviously important for insulin metabolism and use. And so again, these are multiple vectors of and yes, absolutely. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is through the roof. So what's really interesting is L-carnitine fumarate in that form is specific to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And if you don't have a lot of hyperacidity, that's a really good one to use, L-carnitine fumarate. Love it. So, and then also things that are very liver protective, but I don't love milk thistle because it impairs phase 1 liver detoxification. If you have a lot of those genes, then I would pulse milk thistle. When I got very sick with viruses 7 years ago, I took milk thistle, but for a very short time. And my liver enzymes were 400, 500. They were really elevated, but we got them down. We got them down fast. It was virus, right? So there's a lot of reasons for it, but it is, I mean, clearly the food supply. The food supply is number one, because in my book, it says let food be thy medicine. And now with many of my writings, I say food is the alpha and the omega. If you get everything else right and you get the food wrong, you're still getting it wrong, right? And by food alone. So no kidding, this is a new client that we saw just a few weeks ago, and she's in California, so we hadn't even set the supplements yet. In 3 days, 3 days out of following the new plan, her blood sugar stabilized without any kind of intervention. She said, even I had chocolate and my blood sugar was normal. And her blood pressure, which she had been on blood pressure medication, but I said, just please take your blood pressure every day, because it's going to drop once you stop taking away these offenders. It was 118/70 without medication in 3 days. That's how powerful the body is when it meets its match from a food perspective.
Insulin resistance. So I am not on a high sugar diet. I'm not on a low carb diet. I eat natural carbs. But what I'm seeing is blood sugar higher. Is that related, or can that be related to viral activity, to fatty liver, to the spike protein, without eating the Snickers bar and the Ben & Jerry's?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in my personal case, when I got the flu this January, my insulin went to 31. My insulin is usually 4 to 7, right? It went to 31. That's crazy. That was a function of this situation. Now, again, what happens is, and I caution people with their blood work, that is absolutely outrageous, right? And all of a sudden they have 3 autoimmune conditions and their blood looks absolutely horrible. Not to be Pollyannish about it and say, oh, it's nothing. It is not nothing. However, you might be in an acute state. And if you do the right things, you can bring it down. My insulin is now back to, I think 7 was the last read. I just had it done a few months ago. So yes, things change when it's a tripping mechanism that then has this avalanche cascade. And insulin insensitivity can come from protein, it can come from fat, it can come from histamine. There are many reasons. And again, if you've been exposed, histamine is a big deal. Histamine is really, really a big deal.
We
So
talked about histamine last time. So if anyone missed that episode, make sure you go back and listen to it. Histamines are affecting all people, even those like me who have never had issues in the past. And it's been a huge issue with everybody in my family. And I always take my family of 5 as the N of 5 to kind of sample what's going on in the world. So fatty liver, insulin resistance, what I want to talk about is because these metabolic diseases are all related, fatty liver disease, heart disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, which is going through the roof. Let's go over the diet. What does it look like? Are we intermittent fasting? Are we keto? Are we vegan? What are we, Teri?
well, we are N of 1. It gets down to you can't follow your neighbor, you can't follow a discipline that is not specifically to you. And that's why I feel we're pioneering. And we've proven it over and over again. Now, over this 20 years of my clinical outcomes, we're just different. We're different than even functional medicine. Your daughter's an example, another example. And so we have to be tied to our genetic blueprint and our current state of health, is we have to understand our genetic vulnerabilities and our current state of health. When my insulin was 31, post flu, post Epstein-Barr, I had to eat differently than when my insulin was not. I went vegetarian again because at that time my liver was so taxed managing the insulin, because the liver also manages insulin, that I went vegetarian. But I went low sulfur, low oxalate vegetarian to give my body a break, right? And so we can't be one thing all the time. Even, it's the navigation. Your daughter's a great point. And an example, she used to be able to eat all these fatty foods, and then, fat just almost, she wanted to puke all the time because she couldn't process it. Right now she'll get back to eating all of that. And bison ribeye is fatty. So for her to have asked for that today for lunch or whenever it was recently is a miracle, short of, but it's amazing, right? Because her body's now able to assimilate it, and she has the appetite to bring in that fat, which her body naturally in an otherwise balanced state needs, right?
Yeah. There's times when I'll sit down and eat a piece of salmon, and 4 bites in, I'm like, oh, I can't eat anymore. And then there's times where I could eat, 16 ounces of it, no problem. And it's the current state of health, right? So
Exactly.
the other issue that I've seen is an inability to break down protein and fat. And obviously that is related to the liver. Can you talk about how the spike protein affects the protein and fat metabolism?
Well, it's a spike protein. That means it's indigestible. And again, it's less digestible, let's say. Helps to support the making of amyloids. There's in the clinical literature, it shows it. So if you're eating protein that you can't break down, and then you're living in a spike protein environment that helps you further less break down protein, then we're scroogled, right? And so we have to be very careful. That doesn't mean be vegetarian necessarily. Like I did, I was vegetarian for a short while because I needed it and my body understood it that I needed it. But then I have to get back to my wild, because I do really well on wild. And so I had always had trouble with digestion my entire life. Always. And what it was for me was protein. At the end of the day, it was always protein. But when I went wild, my body changed and my digestion changed. And it's the best digestion I've had of my entire life since I became wild. And so, do I eat non-wild? Very rarely, but I do. I was just traveling and I ate non-wild, but I'm really careful. And then I eat around the non-wild with very, very safe foods. And then I take my supplements, right? To help manage those instances when I'm not wild. And so right now, what we are seeing is the lower amyloid burden. So why is wild so important? My outcomes show that a lower amyloid burdened protein source is much healthier. Not only much healthier, you can break it down and you're not creating a feeder system for other things like those viruses that are laying in wait, ready to pounce on us. And they're pouncing much more frequently and much more virulently, right? So, and again, as an autoimmune condition, not necessarily as chickenpox, instead you'll have PCOS or you'll have Bell's palsy or you'll have MS, right, from varicella. So it's really a function of you have to be able to have the gut integrity. So if you're eating the wrong foods, if you're eating a lot of sulfur-rich foods and you have a sulfur sensitivity, how do you know? Do you smell asparagus when you go to the bathroom if you're eating it? That's one of the signs. Does your family have a history of sulfa allergies from antibiotics? Do not eat sulfur if you have a sulfa allergy. Oh my goodness. So that's a really big deal. And if you're eating a lot of sulfur-rich foods, you're literally breaking down your gut instead of building the lining that supports the gut integrity.
Yeah.
Right? If you're eating a lot of high histamine foods, it's poking holes because of neurotransmitters in your gut. If you are eating a lot of oxalates and you have some dysbiotic gut, then that candida is going to be really happy and that mold's going to be really happy. So you're going to be building a gut that doesn't have integrity because the body is now stressed with neurotransmitters. And what does stress do? Opens up the tight junctions of your gut. You're going to be more leaky. And then what does the body do in a leaky gut environment? It responds with histamine, which we already had to begin with. So there's a circular situation of, uh-oh, because of what just happened.
And that's why when you get your blood test back and the numbers are through the roof, it's not just one answer. It's the intersection in this firestorm of all of these things feeding off of each other and making them worse. So before we go, I want to talk about the immune mover, the wild lights, which I can't wait for them to come back, and the stress mover and where they play into the immune system and, being helpful in the stressful environment that we're in.
Thank you. Yes, our wild lights are out. I'm so sorry. And because of our manufacturing plant is in Houston, and with the Houston hurricane, things got slowed down. So we'll be hopefully getting them in stock in the next 2 to 4 weeks. So I developed these supplements. I never had a real penchant to be a, chemist or biochemist to create supplements. But what I felt was there were holes in the supplement world that needed to be addressed. And I even spoke with some of these large companies. I said, hey, let me help you. Because I feel like, if you put the wrong ingredients in there, it's going to be wrong. And they were less interested, but I went back to one of these large manufacturers and I said, well, will you make them for me if I create my own formulation? And I did. And so starting with stress mover, that is such a big, happy supplement. And people have called it the God pill and the chill pill. Why is stress mover so important? Because I call stress the fire starter to everything. If we don't calm the body, everything is going to be harder to manage downstream. All viruses, everything is triggered by stress, right? And if the body's stressed, and it also opens up the tight junctions, as I've just mentioned. So stress mover, unless you have an overt MAOA gene, how do you know? Go get your genes tested. Then you're so go clean to take stress mover. I've even had it take it in small very very micro doses with small children, and it's very effective. It's very effective against ADHD, against stress, against anxiety. It's really just the chill pill. And what it does is it has glycine, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, that we are being hijacked from glycine. So glycine helps to digest protein. It has manganese, which helps to manage histamine. It has phosphatidylserine from sunflower lecithin that really helps to manage that HPA axis, and a little bit of rhodiola for adrenal support. So it's this little magic formulation that really helps you stay out of the stress environment. The immune mover, as I call it, everyone's new every day. It is broad spectrum. Let's not get sick, right?
Mhm.
Because it has many botanicals that help support viruses and bacteria and parasites and fungi. So it's really broad spectrum. I've had people tell me, gosh, Teri, if I start feeling a little yuck, I take the stress mover, it pops me right out of it. And I personally carry it with me everywhere I go because I travel so much. I just got back from a trip. And without it, if I start feeling a little yucky, I'll go, usually it's recommended 1 1 to 2 times a day. I'll take it 4 times a day. And I just know I'll even take it every 4 hours and it just pops me right back out. And then my Wild Ice, which I'm actually drinking now, it's really very popular with my athletes and my rock stars, actually, because of their body's dehydration. But it also helps with nitric oxide, which has also been hijacked by the spike protein.
Mhm.
It helps balance oxalate metabolism. I have this one little guy named Trip. He's an amazing story, Sarah, and I know we're short on time, but he's an amazing story. I feel it's worth noting. I've known him since he was in utero, and his mother had a severe mold exposure. And so this little guy was born with a severe mold exposure.
Mhm.
And what we did was, as a tiny 2-month-old, we put Wild Lights in his water for bathing. And then when he was old enough, we started putting sprinkles in his water that he was drinking. And now this little guy is superhuman. He just turned 2. He
Mhm.
has not been sick. His neurotransmitters that are early on really affected with dopamine and serotonin because mold affects that. And he couldn't sleep for his first few months, really couldn't sleep at all. This
Right.
thing is turned him around so much so he asks for it. He can't be without it. And this is a 2-year-old. He has such high innate intelligence to know that this thing is making him the best version of himself and help to manage all that yuck that he had. Really amazing. I mean, it's just, to me, it's remarkable. It's very safe, 3 ingredients, and it's all natural.
Yes, and I love it. I do my hot yoga and I drink it with my, as I'm sweating out, because you got to replace the electrolytes, and your energy comes from those electrolytes. But the formula is simple, but it is so effective.
Yeah.
And right now, all of you moms out there have pushed the kids out to school, hoping they don't come back. But when I had my young kids, before I knew any of this stuff, I had my kids come right back into the house week 2 because they were sick. And you had that cold and flu starting to share germs. And we're not even talking about pandemic. We're just talking about the common flu and the runny green noses and all of that. So you want to keep these little guys healthy so that you can go on with your life as school starts. But I've got college kids too, which that's a whole nother thing. You got to keep them strong with all of their adrenals are tapped, their late nights, all that they're doing. So these supplements are going to fill in the gaps when the diet isn't doing it and when the lifestyle isn't perfect. So Teri, you're amazing. I'm so grateful for you personally and in business. And you truly are a pioneer and doing so much amazing work. And so can you please tell people where they can find your book and where they can find you?
Yes, so please, a call to action. I really urge people to read the Wilditarian Diet. It's almost like I wrote it for the pandemic, not knowing that it was going to be so really anchored in helping us stay well. On Amazon.com. You can also get it through our website, TeriCochrane.com. That's where you can find our supplements. And just keep really tuning into your truth. And even though a very skilled and learned individual may be telling you something, if it doesn't feel right for you, and I say this to my clients as well, if what I'm telling you doesn't feel right, then it's not right for you. So really listen to yourself. Our truth lies within us. We just have to really listen and then trust it.
I have to just say that I'm going through something right now where there's something in my supplement routine that's not working for me. And I just sat with it for a moment, and it was confirmed by a practitioner this morning that I was right. And so I knew intuitively what was going on. You know it too.
Yeah.
It's in all of us. You just have to sit with it. And so thank you for that. And thanks everyone else for listening. Our discussion does not have to stop here, especially today. I know Teri is super smart, and maybe you're thinking, I didn't catch what she said, or I don't understand it. You can join the group coaching on Telegram. It's free, it's uncensored, and you can also email me through the website to get your free supplement protocol or ask your questions about your health issues. Follow me on social media at Accelerated Health Products. You can listen to these podcasts anywhere. Accelerated Health with Sara Banta on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, over 100 different platforms. And share this episode. This one especially is so important to be sharing with your friends and family. You can also get 10% off your first order of the cutting edge supplements at Accelerated Health Products using coupon WELCOME10 if you want to try the Accelerated Copper or the Immune Mover or the Stress Mover or the Wild Lights, Accelerated Silver to keep that immune system strong. You can try any of those and use that coupon. I'm live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, so join me next time for more ways to unlock your health potential. Thanks for joining us here and have a great week.